I appreciate all the networking. You guys can continue to network in the hall. We do want to be respectful of our panelists here on the stage. And if you would help me, welcome to Corpus Christi. First, we have Jenna Saucedo-Herrera. She is President and CEO of Greater SATX. It's a regional economic partnership charged with growing and diversifying the 8-county San Antonio New Braunfels MSA. In this role, Jenna and her team work closely with the regional business community and government to recruit new companies, foster global business relationships, help local companies grow, and build the local talent pipeline. Please again, help me welcome Jenna Saucedo-Herrera. Joining Jenna, we have Sergio Contreras, CEO of the Atlas Hall and Rodriguez, a full-service law firm based in South Texas. For over 70 years, the firm has provided corporate litigation and business legal counsel. Mr. Contreras formerly served as the president and CEO for the Rio Grande Valley Partnership, where he advocated for regional collaboration and economic prosperity in South Texas. Once again, Sergio. Next, we have Jean Lindgren, President and CEO of the Laredo Economic Development Corporation. Jean transitioned to the LEDC after completing 35 years leading global automotive supply company that operates North America with more than 25 maquiladora plants throughout Mexico, including distribution centers in El Paso and Laredo, Texas. I wonder where your area of expertise is. Please help welcome Jean. And to our friends in the room, I think this gentleman needs no introduction, Mr. Mike Culbertson, President and CEO of the CCREDC. In this role, he is the Economic Development Corporation of Corpus Christi. They bring new jobs and investment to the region, resulting most recently in $57.4 billion in new capital expenditures since 2010. Let's welcome our panelists and let's get this started. So we had a lot of great context from Chairman Hunter on some bigger picture perspectives regarding South Texas and development opportunities that we see in the region. Given back, he talked about 10 years, 20 years. Where you see where we are today, a lot of what I feel maybe 2 decades ago, South Texas in particular, had to play a lot of defense, maybe more than offense, and get out into kind of a lot of the spaces that you guys are exploring today. But if you were to talk about challenges, what are the challenges you believe Texas must address to continue experiencing economic growth? And I'm going to start with our guest from San Antonio. Ladies first, Ms. Jenna Saucedo-Herrera.
I love it. Well, first of all, is this on?
Is it on?
All right, well, let's talk about it.
Is it?
It's not going yet. Okay, test.
Is it on? And I'll frame the question again. What are the challenges you believe Texas must address to continue experiencing economic growth?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, to the Texas Association of Business, the Port, and all of the various sponsors for hosting. I couldn't agree more that Chairman Hunter was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the legislative session. If you ask any economic development organization, any chamber within the state of Texas, I think this was really the first time that every single one of us rallied together with one distinct and targeted priority, and he was really there to kind of carry it over the goal line for us, and he's just tremendous. So thank you to him as well. He was also a little like Oprah with the shout-outs this morning. You get a shout-out. Everybody stand. I'm not going to do that because I don't know as many people in the room as he does. But I will tell you, look, he mentioned, a lot of the things that make the state of Texas great, right? And my colleagues here on the stage, we are so fortunate with the macroeconomic climate right now, with everything that's happening in China and Russia. We are uniquely positioned. Really, Central Texas, South Texas, down into Mexico, all eyes are on this area of the world. And we are set, if we continue to work together, continue to position ourselves, I believe, to be one of the most dynamic employment corridors in the world. But we have to continue to not only collaborate, we have to focus in on our strengths, right, that were cited earlier today, and as you mentioned, Al, also on our areas of opportunity. And I think they're one and the same. Right, so from a strengths perspective, population growth was cited earlier, and that is a huge advantage for us. In particular, with some states within the United States and also global communities that are experiencing population decline, right? So population growth is huge for us. Of course, land assets, infrastructure assets, et cetera, those are all incredible strengths. I also think that on the flip side of that, one of our greatest opportunities is workforce and people. So in the state of Texas, we certainly don't have a people problem. And we most certainly don't have a jobs problem. If you see those governor's cups that Governor Abbott touts time and time again, that we've received, 12 years and counting for being the top state for relocation and growth of homegrown jobs, all of that is wonderful. But transferable skill sets and making sure that we are equipping Texans today for the in-demand occupations of the future is going to be what sets us apart. So it's certainly an advantage for us, but I think we've got to get it right. Not just workforce development, but education investments in the state of Texas.
Gene, I think you want to take tag on that one too?
Yeah, is my mic on? Can you hear me okay? All right, thank you. Gene Lindgren, Laredo Economic Development. First, I'd like to thank the Texas Association of Business, Glenn Hammer, David Zapata, Chairman, the Port Corpus Christi. This is a wonderful venue. And it's an honor and a bit humbling to be on the same stage with my colleagues. And it's great that everybody made it. We had an uninvited guest with Tropical Storm Harold. I know we need the rain, but let's everybody be safe. I'd like to answer just a couple points on the main challenges for the state of Texas. We need to keep the miracle going. Being number one, everybody wants to knock us off the pedestal, right? And so we need to keep maintaining no corporate or personal income taxes and keep regulations fair. We've been highly successful as a state, and South Texas is certainly a shining example of attracting companies, investment, and people from other states. Domestic migration, I've heard that 1,300 new Texas residents arrive every day from other states and in some cases other countries. But we can't let it impact our advantages in our thought process, our pro-business government and private sector successes. And hopefully I won't wrinkle anybody's feathers by saying we don't want to California our state, right? And we need to stay in front of this infrastructure, and I think I'll talk further about some water issues that we need to stay in front of to make sure, as Commissioner mentioned and Mr. Hunter, that we need to stay ahead of infrastructure, water, people, energy, broadband. Thank you, Al.
Oh, no, thank you. Well, and I'm just going to kind of dovetail that question into, Jenna kind of alluded to opportunities, just more than challenges, opportunities for economic growth. What do you believe this will, the state will experience in the upcoming years? And mostly using the tool of House Bill 5. And I'll start with you, Sergio.
Well, good morning. Thank you to TAB for hosting today's Development Summit. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak on something I think that we're all very passionate about. Stated earlier some of the challenges. The good thing is that our legislators did an outstanding job in laying the ground to ensure that we continue economic development. However, the job's not done. I think we all know that. As I left the office yesterday, I printed out something that Senator Hinojosa sent out. There was 14 propositions that'll be up. One is property tax relief, which will continue to drive the opportunity for investment from small business owners. In addition, for broadband, yes, legislation was passed for $1.5 billion. However, we still need to ensure that the proposition passes so we can ensure in that. So there's others, right? For HB 5, it's a true benefit for our South Texas region. Some of you may have heard the $18 billion investment that is happening at the Port of Brownsville. So those are the economic opportunities where we all benefit from Laredo all the way over here to Corpus, which is also an opportunity for infrastructure support. And we're fortunate that TxDOT announced $142 billion in investment under their 10-year UTP plan, which again supports the efforts of economic investment that we all need to be able to drive safely and be able to sustain the growth that we'll continue to see because of trade.
Mike, do you want to touch on House Bill 5 and how you foresee the Coastal Bend region applying this tool?
Sure. Thank you very much for everybody. Sarah went up and testified. Of course, the guy in the Dracula suit was right behind her, so I don't know how effective that was. Yeah. House Bill 5 is a great win, but we lost 313, so we're not ahead by any means. And I will tell you, we know people in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Oklahoma, and they had marketing materials that said Texas was stupid enough to lose 313. When you go out now, companies our companies don't end up in the middle of cities, they end up in the middle of counties, and the tax rate's like 1.78%, with schools at 1.25. So if you do not provide relief on that, known relief, then you won't get it. We had a company here, a large company, that billions of dollars, they said without 313 they would not be here because Mississippi was throwing $100 million out. Louisiana has one where the state just says, hey, you get 80% on every single tax there is in Louisiana. And they have it for 5 years, but it's almost automatically doubled. So House Bill 5 is very important, and I know a lot of people worked really hard for it, and we appreciate that. I remember seeing Glenn on Zoom calls. I mean, every Monday we had those calls and how important it was. I knew it was scary when Todd Staples, when we met right before the vote, and we went through every single legislator, and wow. But that allows us to bring companies with high investment, meaning hundreds of millions of dollars, and 75 jobs. And we're going to see this when we talk about hydrogen. As technology moves, the jobs get fewer. And it becomes very important in our MSA, Corpus and San Patricio County, Nueces and San Patricio County, we have manufacturers are 12% of the, they're 7% of the people, of the jobs, and 16% of the wages. That's how much this means to us.
Thanks, Mike.
Can I chime in on
please.
that too? First of all, I was there at the hearing where Dracula was present. I thought for a second it might have been Glenn, and then it wasn't. But that was an experience of a lifetime for me, for sure. But I do have to mention, look, as it relates to HB 5, I think you hit on a couple of comments I just want to double down on. One is that we are by no means ahead as it relates to incentives. And I'm not advocating that we do need to lead with incentives, right? My colleagues and I up here on this stage, we are leading with everything else that makes the state of Texas and San Antonio and our respective regions competitive, right? We lead with workforce, we lead with infrastructure, sites, water, power, right? Everything that makes us great. But at the end of the day, companies are looking at the bottom line, right? So if we meet the minimum criteria, great, but it's a checklist, and they're looking for any reason to cross us off the list. And the state of Texas, economic development is different, right? We are decentralized. So we are competing directly with governors and different states that are offering, in my case, billions of dollars on deals. And we don't play that game. If you look at the amount of money that even TEF, the Enterprise Fund, has awarded since inception, is nowhere near what some of these states are offering for one deal or free land, et cetera. And so, again, by no means are we saying we need to lead with incentives. But it's all about reducing risk and that bottom line for these upfront investments of billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars. And whatever we can do to show these companies love, to show them that we're serious about them and reducing their risk will make us more successful. So now we have the arrow back, right, in the quiver. We still need more. We still need to be competitive. So this just keeps us basically where we were before 313 went away. But I want to be very clear. Our incentive toolkit is nowhere near competitive with other states around the United States, but we are working really hard with what we have to offer, our favorable tax environment and everything else that makes Texas the best place to do business.
Yeah, I think that was what was scariest going into the session, is if we didn't have a tool or solution, going forward. Gene, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, to echo my colleagues' comments, the incentives, we typically don't want to lead with incentives, right? We have a great, young, talented workforce. And we have all those advantages that we talked about. And I'm looking forward to working with the state's ED and Tourism Office and the Comptroller's Office about how to implement House Bill 5. But I also wanted to acknowledge the importance of continuation of programs. Although Jenna mentioned that we might not be leading the state with incentive packages, and in some cases we don't have to, but the continuation of the Skills Development Fund, the Texas Enterprise Fund, is important, and that should not go unnoticed. Last week, our community hosted Texas Workforce Commissioner Alberto Trevino of Labor, and we talked about that with the stakeholders in our community, how important those programs are, including the JET grants. And there's one piece of legislation that didn't pass, and I wanted to bring it up because I think it might be applicable where we can rally our forces together, and that's House Bill 3805. It didn't pass this year. It got some momentum, but didn't quite make it. It's focused on improving border security and international trade corridors by adding an additional category to TxDOT's UTP program for those types of projects. And I think it's especially important for communities like Laredo and the Valley and Brownsville and Corpus, and in some cases San Antonio. We can't compete with the population in the MSAs of Dallas and Houston. They have about half of the population of the state, and a lot of TxDOT's formulas are based on population. But we are the aortas of international trade, the exports. Congratulations, Port Corpus Christi, for being number 3 in the world for energy products, behind I'll go ahead and say it, behind some governments that might not be as friendly as we want to be with. Russia and Saudi Arabia it was, thank you. And so Laredo's population is about 260,000 and growing. Corpus Christi, I looked it up, 323,000. RGVs has 1.3 million, and San Antonio with 2.4. So our communities do pale in comparison to the rest of the state, and we need to keep reminding everybody in Austin, in some cases DC, of our importance to the economy with our ports and our trade. It contributes to our North America competitiveness. It's good for Texas. It's good for the country. And some people even say our national security. Thank you.
No, thank you, Gene.
Isn't Laredo like the largest import?
Inland port, yeah. You guys are.
You know what? I would like to correct that, and thank you for bringing it up. Port Laredo, with its 2 bridges and rail system, has been the number 1 land port for years, if not decades. Starting last October, in terms of value of products traded, imports and exports combined, we've taken over the number 1 spot of the number 1 port in the country. And I'm working to get some independent cooperation on if, by chance, we're the number 1 land port in the world.
Okay.
I'm working on that. I can't make that announcement yet.
You kind of did.
No. No one's been able to discredit it, but I would like to get some. If you have some think tanks or some ways to corroborate that would be awesome. And I don't want to take away from the Governor Abbott's announcements later, but I think he might have something to say about Texas's ranking as a world economy as well. I heard something at an RGV event last week, so thank you, Al.
No, thank you for these comments. And we're certainly the South Texas Triangle is certainly well represented with all you folks here on the table. And I'm glad you brought up the conversation of international trade, NAFTA, now we're calling it USMCA. Let's speak on that a little bit regarding port of entry activity. I told Sergio I was going to throw you guys a little curveball regarding the bridges and the kind of commerce you see coming across your ports on the inland ports on the border. And I'll start with you, Sergio. What kind of activity do you see?
You know, it's interesting because as of the beginning of this year, Mexico is now the number 1 trading partner with the U.S. And so in 2022, there was about $863 billion in trade between Texas and Mexico. And according to TxDOT, it's projected to grow even more by 2050. So according to TxDOT, we're projected to grow trade between Mexico and Texas up to $1.5 trillion. So what does that mean? That means that it's going to require additional infrastructure investment here in Texas, and we're grateful to TxDOT and the legislature that continue that. The type of trade that we see at our ports of entry varies across all sectors, from grain, from parts for computers, from parts for automobiles. It supports, Matt knows this very well, the oil and gas industry. And you feel it here in Corpus and at the Port of Brownsville. So there's multiple sectors that benefit from the trade that we see at our ports of entry. The Barbie, how many have seen the movie? I have not. Prior to the movie launching, there was limited production of the Barbie in Mexico. Ever since, it's been produced quite a bit out of Monterrey, and it's crossing through our ports of entry. So some of you may have it at home, some of you have it in the office.
So Barbie is made in Mexico.
Yes.
Okay.
Production, yes. There's other components. As an example, the FAR port of entry, 60% of all the produce and ag component that comes into the U.S., 60% comes up from the FAR International Bridge. There's other sectors that are supporting to trade. However, those are some of the highlights that we have through the ports. And Laredo as well sees that, El Paso. We're fortunate to have, 29 ports of entry in Texas. And you know, in the valley, we have four foreign trade zones. And so the state of Texas also leads in economic impact thanks to those foreign trade zones.
He kind of passed it to you there, Gene. Is there anything you want to brag about in addition there to the?
Well,
to
I know
your...
Adriana Cruz uses the expression, it ain't bragging if it's true.
Right,
and,
right.
I'm somewhat humble, but I still, I guess, reserve the right to do that when it's appropriate. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say, but I need to say it, we're blessed to be in Texas, right? I adopted Texas as my home 30 years ago, and I'm here to stay. In some of the things that we take for granted, but let's make sure it doesn't change over the decades, and that's no corporate taxes, no personal income taxes, a light and fair regulatory touch, and it's contribute to our hardworking population. And so we were already growing pre-pandemic, right? We had steady growth, and winning the Texas Governor Abbott, winning the Governor's Cup, 9, 10, is it 11 or 12 years now going. But since the pandemic and since the whole reshoring, nearshoring, ally-shoring concept, it's really jump-started or step-functioned the growth. And that's because, again, preaching to the choir, global companies are rethinking their global footprint. So companies that might have been in all continents, in all areas of the world, are leaning towards more regional production approach. And who's more competitive in the world than North America? So let's bring that manufacturing back, and it's working. And then for Laredo, for instance, I'm going to speak about Laredo, right? That's why I'm here. But in collaboration with our South Texas counterparts, our vision is to continue the explosive growth. We talked about the explosion. We talked about booming. Hopefully we won't have a tsunami today from the tropical storm. But the supply chain, Laredo, some people say, is too heavily dependent on supply chain and transportation. We have about 30% of our workforce focused on retail, trade, and utilities, compared to the rest of the country of 21%. But the supply chain is diversified. It's everything from avocados, electronics, automobiles, energy, food, and we are seeing some diversification, some real live manufacturing landed projects, and a lot in the pipeline, and looking forward to continued collaboration from the port of Corpus Christi, Brownsville, San Antonio, and the Rio Grande Valley. Thank you, Al.
No, thanks, Gene. So a lot of the infrastructure, all these roads essentially lead up your way, Jenna. Do you see some of this residual impacts or companies strategically locating as a result? Or anything you could share, any insights?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, I said all eyes are on this region, and we have done a lot of work, in particular in the San Antonio area, in collaborating with Opportunity Austin, right? Our partners just up north by 35. And by the way, a lot of work to do there, specifically as it relates to our infrastructure and better connectivity between those two economies that in my mind are one, right? Gene mentioned earlier the population growth, and even between San Antonio and Austin, right? 2.6 in San Antonio, together with Austin about 4.9. We're still not even at the size and scale of a Dallas, right, or Houston. And so, frankly, to be relevant at the state level, we realized this last go-around that we needed to partner formally with them. We had shared lobbyists. It was a shared arrangement. It was a formal partnership with Opportunity Austin and my colleague Gary Farmer over there. What I believe we can do better is leverage our partners down south, which is why I was so excited to participate here, and that Tab was coordinating this event. And I have Rebecca Villagran from the South Texas Business Partnership here with us as well, because I think this is the missing link of collaboration, not just to have influence and be relevant at the state level, but further at the federal level, right? If we do this well, if we collaborate around shared priorities for collective impact, I think we're going to move the needle. But as it relates specifically to your question of investment, so our pipeline today is about 60% manufacturing. And this is advanced manufacturing. This is highly technical, right? These are folks that are maintaining these robots to build a truck at Navistar or Toyota or Aishin, et cetera. And then, as you all know, manufacturing has that multiplier effect, right? So I was so pleased that manufacturing was brought back in to HB5, and it's a big component there. But when I'm talking about those billion-dollar projects or hundreds of million-dollar projects, they're specifically in automotive manufacturing, semiconductor manufacturing, a lot on the EV side. And this is where I think we can really set ourselves apart, because we've been building that ecosystem ever since we landed Toyota 20 years ago, and now Tesla right up the road, and Navistar and others in the pipeline. And so, again, that's an area where I think if we are working collaboratively to identify those strengths that we have in those priority areas from a recruitment perspective, it's going to continue to yield dividends.
Well, and Mike, if you want to dovetail on that, and I'll read this pretty much verbatim, how can we connect regional economic development goals with South Texas regional economic development goals, and realizing that we might compete with each other sometimes, right? But how can we do it in a way that it's not a zero-sum game? Serge?
Thank you. I'll start with what is it that we're doing at home, meaning the Rio Grande Valley, and then expand on some of the opportunities that we have beyond the valley. So you don't know, the valley is made up of 4 different counties. So there are 4 county judges. In those counties, there's 47 municipalities, meaning 47 mayors, 47 EDCs, and then you've got about 32 school districts. Some share jurisdiction. And over the years, an organization which I worked at one point, now on the board, the RGV Partnership, engaged with the business community to continue to collaborate across the Rio Grande Valley, and successfully did that. It has now, I think it's since 1944 is when that was founded. This past week, we celebrated, thanks to the engagement of Governor Abbott, there was a formal agreement signed amongst all county judges, all mayors, as well as the governor, and that's to continue to work together. And to do this as one region and one voice. That is the message that the RGV Partnership, thanks to the President Daniel Silva there, will take the lead in driving that amongst the 4-county region. It's very important that the business community engages, and that's why it did, and then also with our elected officials. And if you have not heard, as of earlier this year, there is also another formal agreement signed amongst the mayors from the Rio Grande Valley and mayor from San Antonio, again, to drive that collaboration and be able to continue the momentum that we have here in Texas. We're fortunate that we have a competitive legislature, a competitive governor who doesn't like our sports here in Texas, and that drives our economy as well. And if we can't compete, then we can't play. So it's great to be in a competitive landscape. And there's other organizations, and I made a note that today's another component of it, thanks to the Development Summit by TAB. That's another. This is another venue, another opportunity. In the Rio Grande Valley, our 2 Secretaries of States are here today. In fact, there's a Border Trade Advisory Committee, BTAC, meeting in the Valley, and that's made up of ports of entries, EDCs, and investments for trade in the Valley today. So there's opportunities, and it's great that we're engaging today. So it's good to see that we're also now here in Corpus, as it's very important for the economy.
Gene, do you want to add something?
Yeah. As Sergio mentioned, today's a good example, right? So the Texas Association of Business in meetings, some of my colleagues for the first time last night at the reception, and again today, mentioned the BTAC, the Border Trade Advisory Committee. I would suggest that we look at, if we're not already, to make sure we're advocates and sponsors of some of these institutions in coalitions, and then work together as a South Texas force to be reckoned with. So the North American Strategy for Competitiveness is one. If you haven't heard of the NASCO network, let's talk about that. It's a tri-national group for the competitiveness of all 3 countries in North America. The BTAC, Ports to Plains, I-69 Alliance, and then considering, like you did with the Austin Alliance, some joint lobbying in Austin and in D.C., right? We are a force to be reckoned with. And also, we talked about infrastructure. I talked about the House bill that I'd like to see resurrected next year. But I think we also need our governments and private sector to start working on water. We can't let water be an issue in the decades to come. The Rio Grande is one of the 10 most endangered rivers in the world. A lot of the communities up and down the river rely on that, and communities are looking for secondary water sources, so we need to look at not just surface water, groundwater, potentially collaborative desalinization for...
I think we'll kick it over to Mike on that. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, we're very thankful for this water, by the way, because it'll fill up Choke Canyon and Lake Corpus Christi. But I got to tell you, they started thinking about desal a long time ago. But in 2018, we really started hard, and it's beyond me that we can't get a permit in 2023. And I know we had COVID, but you still could work. It is just beyond me. This is just one of the things that we could do quickly. If you give me 30 million gallons a day, I promise you I will have 6 hydrogen plants at $1 billion apiece, 75 to 100 jobs, and they will be part of the energy transition. But more importantly, you have oil and gas. We are oil and gas. We are proudly oil and gas. And if you read the EIA, the Energy Institute, Administration, you will find that oil and gas is 80% of our power and economy now, and it's going to be 60% in 2050. That 60% is bigger than the 80% now. It's not going away. Somebody could enter one of these refineries and retire. I promise you that. The other part that we're looking at is power. We think, we have power. Down here, power is a big deal. When it drops just a little bit, you see flares all up and down Refinery Row because they need power. And maybe renewables is not quite the answer. I know that the legislature passed peakers, peak power at this session, and we're appreciative of that. But, we're not like the Midwest ISO, the California ISO. We don't have somebody else to depend on. We're ERCOT. We're alone and not afraid, which, sounds very Texan, but it's very scary. So we really need the legislature to keep looking at this. As much as we think, hey, we're Texans, we're really good, everything's good. We have no water and we're not sure about power. So we need to keep an eye on it. And I'll tell you, for businesses, Sarah can get up there and Al, and we're lucky we have Al and Jenny from the chamber that keep track on this. But if a business sits up there at a committee and says, this is hurting my business, this is hurting Texans, that carries more weight, I promise you, than me getting up or Sarah with the Dracula costume. It's very important that you stay engaged, either with your chambers or whoever looking at, and you act. When if you see a county judge walking through the halls in Austin, they're a rock star. Everybody wants to talk to them. You have that power as a business person and a business owner. So please use it when this comes up.
For the record, there's an asterisk on his comment. San Antonio has plenty of water. Storage pipeline. Do your research on it. It's incredible. But I have a couple of comments that I want to make. Might be slightly provocative, might take us a bit off track, but I think they're worth noting given the timeliness. So first of all, it hasn't been said here, but I'm going to lean into it because we're planning to more so in San Antonio as well with our messaging. But if any of you are data wonks and you're following Census Bureau data, we've talked a lot about population. What we haven't talked about is the Latino population in South Texas. And, in San Antonio that we're 56% today. And if you're tracking the data, you know that this region represents the future face from a demographic perspective of the state of Texas and of the United States. And there are companies all over the world that are contemplating their ESG strategies and their investment strategies, how to get to this consumer base first through talent acquisition, right, as a primary priority. And we're going to lean into that proudly in San Antonio, and I think all of us should, right, because we are the future of the country from that perspective. The other thing that's more of a rallying cry, the other thing a little bit more provocative that I think worth noting, I am so glad I read about the partnership, the RGB. I think that's incredible. Regionalism is certainly the way to go. There's also a dynamic at play, and I thought it would behoove us to not talk through it and flesh it out fully, but with regards to the model of economic development and chambers in the state of Texas. If you're reading any sort of headlines, you're seeing that it's a problem right now, right? So Fort Worth spun out of their chamber. Opportunity Austin spun out of theirs. We have 24 in my service territory in San Antonio, but our 3 larger, more influential are all in search for CEOs right now because they're trying to figure out their value proposition and path forward. And so I agree with you. We need to step up and we need a unified business voice. I think we need to lead with the business voice. In fact, when I inherited my organization, not only have we more than quadrupled the size of the budget, but we've also, more importantly, changed the ratio of public to private investment. So when I inherited the organization, we were 30% private and we were 70% dependent on public funding with a budget of about $3 million. And we've shifted the ratio back and quadrupled that budget. So now I answer to a private sector board. I answer to the largest employer in the state of Texas, HEB. I answer to Valero and USA and other small businesses. But that's important for long-term strategies that aren't dependent on short-term election cycles. And so we won't solve this today, but I want to flag it for each of you. Like, we need that business voice. What does that look like and how are we showing up? And to the point of regionalism, sometimes it's about getting over egos and organizations that have existed for decades to do what's right by our businesses today. So kudos to you guys for doing that down south, and I think we all need to have some more of those critical conversations.
So I'm going to go ahead and put an asterisk for Corpus Christi,
Yes.
that here we proudly are served by one Chamber of Commerce, United Corpus Christi
Thank
Chamber.
you.
Yes, ma'am. You guys, any fun facts to close the deal? I think we're already at time. Just a parting word, fun fact that you want the crowd to know before we go?
If you don't mind, I'll
Go for it, Gene.
say something about Laredo, and it's been a pleasure spending some time with the colleagues and looking forward to continuing to work. Talked about the chamber, talked about water. Very briefly, I'd like to talk about the quick demographic facts on Laredo. Just to set a baseline, the median age in the United States is 38. In Texas, I think it's 35. In Laredo, it's 28. And 32% of the population is under 18. So when companies are visiting us and they want to know about workforce and in education, I blow them away with those stats. And so we're working on improving our diversification with manufacturing and energy. And hospitals and suppliers in the EV market. So just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, guys. I think we're at time, so I'm told we're at time. If you would join me in a round of applause thanking them for joining us today.